watch a video.
Really? What?
Oh, just some scary movie.
You like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
You sick fucks. You've seen one too many.
I said, don't you blame the movies! Movies don't create psychos! Movies make psychos more creative!
Hello, horror hounds, and welcome to the It Slays podcast. I'm your humble host, Rowan.
Hey, it's Mike.
And this is Exilia.
Okay.
I am going to be your ASMR guide. I will be chewing peanuts for you for the next hour and 20 minutes.
And as you listen to Mike chew peanuts, I will do our quick Patreon plug. If you want to become a horror hound, join the other horror hounds on patreon.com/itslayspodcast. We have cool things like thank you cards. You can pick movies. There's a chance to get a shirt.
We'll jerk you off.
I mean, maybe.
We don't do sexual favors for money here.
No.
No judgment against doing that, but...
No, we don't.
We're just not into it. Yeah, Mike.
Speak for yourself.
So before we get into our film for this episode, I figured we'd start off to see what everyone is reading these days. It's been a little while since we touched in on that. Let's start with Exilia this time.
Oh, thanks. Well, I have my stack here just so I can remember all the things I'm in various stages of reading. The first book, I'm still reading The Sum of Small Things. I think it's Elizabeth Currid Hackett. Yes, this is the one about the theory of the aspirational class. Still good, still interesting. I haven't learned much more than I had learned at the beginning, but we're getting there. I also started Everything is Illuminated, Jonathan Safran Foer.
Oh, wow.
Obviously, yeah. Like, I've seen the movie before, but I gave my friend Anna another copy, and we're supposed to be reading it together, although I feel like she's not reading it. Anyways, I'm also reading Introducing Semiotics.
I love semiotics. Yes,
fun.
I've been thinking about semiotics all day.
This is in a graphic novel form, quite enlightening. And the last book I am reading is The History of White People by Nell Irvin Painter, who is a professor at Princeton, and it's basically about the social construction of white people, the white quote-unquote race, whiteness, etc. So
what you're saying is you're reading a book about a loaf of bread with no butter or anything on it.
A lot of mayonnaise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, mayo, yes. But not
Extra
spicy mayo. No spicy mayo.
It's pretty interesting. We started out with Greece and just, yeah, how basically the people who were considered like the pinnacle of whiteness were like not what you'd imagine right now. And how the people who you think of right now as white were like considered barbarians and not included in any sort of intellectual world, I guess you would call them. Yep, those, I'm the life of the party here.
Party animal.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, we are all three of us buried in books pretty much 24/7, so we're all the life of the party.
Yeah.
I mean, you know I go to a party and the first thing I do is, well, A, pour up a drink, and then B, go, where the fuck is your bookcase? Because that's where I'm going to spend the next hour and 20 minutes of my life.
When I first go to someone's home for the first time, if I'm like meeting them, or have like met them recently, I always look at their bookshelf, and that's kind of how I can judge if I'm going to be friends with them or not.
Yeah, 100%.
Judgmental Exilia.
Well, I just
listen.
If they're reading, Nora Roberts, there's probably a good chance we're not gonna like be best friends.
But what if they're reading Nora Roberts and like Frantz Fanon?
Okay, that's an exception. Also very strange and out of character, but I guess I would let that pass.
I like to think that some of us have, diverse interests. I have read I've read Nora Roberts novels. They weren't branded as Nora Roberts, but she has this like sci-fi mystery series that she writes under a different name.
Really?
And when I was like 13 years old, I picked one up at the grocery store and read it and became obsessed. And then found out like 2 years later that it was actually Nora Roberts writing under her pen name. And I was like, well, I'm invested, so.
I guess it's not so much about that author in general, but more like, I'm not into weird romance.
What she stands for.
Or
yeah.
like weird romance novels.
Okay, fair. But to be fair, hers are not weird. They're totally run-of-the-mill.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I'm just throwing that out there.
Very vanilla.
Yeah.
How about you, Mike? What are you reading?
Well, I'm currently reading one book and I just finished another. The book I finished is called The Parting Gift by Evan Fallenberg. I just finished it earlier this afternoon, actually. I was supposed to be cleaning my apartment and I put on Lizzo all afternoon and decided to read. And it was a real interesting book about this guy who... It's written in the form of a letter to somebody who... An old friend of his from grad school who he's staying with. Who's... Apparently he just showed up at his doorstep and said, like, my life is in a shambles, I need to stay with you. And then he writes this letter saying, here's what happened and why I showed up out of the blue. And it's about him essentially, like, leaving America and moving to Israel because he's Jewish. And he has, like, a crisis and something happens and you don't know what it is. But he just, like, up and moves to Israel and then falls in, not love, it's like lust with this Israeli spice farmer.
What?
And it's actually really hot for like 100 pages. All they do is fuck for like the first 70 pages of the book. But and it's really well written. It's a really good book. And it's kind of like, and he's this like grad school guy, so it's this, and the spice farmer is this, it's very much like Lady Chatterley's Lover, like this kind of, you know, earthy, like animalistic sexual person, and this like, you know, more what they think of themselves as like refined, you know, intellectual. But by the time I finished it, and it only took me like maybe 2 days to read, like I just chewed through it. It was a really good book, but it ended very cynically and sort of dark, which normally I'm all about, but in this case, like, it left a little tiny bit of a bad taste in my mouth, but it was still a great book, and, you know, like I said, it was hot, and, you know, anyway, so that's what I finished today, and I always have 4 books on the go, and the other one I'm reading is John William Stoner. I've been kind of picking at that for the last couple of weeks. My book club is reading it.
I've heard of this before.
Yeah, it's one of these, the New York Review of Books re-released it maybe 2 years ago. And it's one of these recovered classics, essentially from like the 60s, where it came out and sort of disappeared and went out of print like 20 years ago, and somebody rediscovered it and kind of like maybe wrote a piece on it, and it got republished, and now it's like this cult classic. And it's really fucking good, man. Like, actually, one of my old professors from the university recommended it to me, and I mentioned it to my book club, so we decided to read it, and it is phenomenal. It's excellent. It's about this, like, you know, dude who grew up on, like, essentially a dirt farm in, like, World War I era and in middle America, and he goes to university and decides he doesn't want to farm. He wants to be, you know, he starts reading, and this English professor takes him under his wing, and he decides, like, you know, he loves literature and he wants to continue and go on to grad school, and, you know, it sort of like follows the course of his life, and it's excellent. I highly recommend it. Yeah, it's really well written. And honestly, if you read the jacket copy on the back of the book, it sounds like really boring. It's like, Dust Bowl, you know, this boring old white guy, but like, I don't know, it's thoroughly enjoyable. Like, I took a bath the other night and like poured up a glass of wine and put on some music and like settled in with that book, and my water was cold by the time I got out of it. I couldn't put it down.
Now, when he's going to grad school, is there also a lot of fucking in this?
You have a farm thing going on right now.
I do have a farm thing, actually. Spice farms, dirt farms. I mean, really, it's the same thing. But counterpoint, in Parting Gift, it was like nonstop ramming, and in this, there's literally, like, it's so sexless. It's like, it would make your boner go limp. So far. Now, I'm only partway through it. Maybe they just, like, you know,
save it till the end.
Maybe they just start fucking like rabbits. I don't know. I mean, he is a farmer. I'm sure he's, you know, fairly animalistic. Not to be cliched or anything. So the third book I'm reading is actually called Double Melancholy by C.E. Gatchalian. I don't know who this person is. I've never heard of this book before, but I picked it up at work. The name, for whatever reason, made me pull it off the shelf, and I pulled it out, and the subtitle is Art, Beauty, and the Making of a Brown Queer Man, and it's by somebody from BC, I believe, and it's a Canadian publisher, Arsenal Pulp. They do a lot of like cool, kind of like indie underground stuff, and he essentially talks about, he's a gay Filipino guy, and he talks about the like art and like thinkers that sort of influenced him while he was like coming of age.
Is this like nonfiction?
It's nonfiction, yeah.
Cool.
And it's split into chapters. Like I kind of flicked through it, and a lot of it was like stuff that I am obsessed with. Like there's a chapter in there on Camille Paglia and Susan Sontag, who are two people that really influenced me when I was growing up. And there's one on the opera singer Maria Callas. There's a chapter on the book Death in Venice. There's a chapter on the Queer as Folk. A chapter on Anne of Green Gables and how he like identified with this like awkward, gangly, ginger who was like an outsider. Anyway, it's a really, really cool book. I gotta say, like, I highly recommend it.
That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, and it's just sort of like a weird, and it's written in a really poetic style that kind of mixes like he obviously, it's like biography. He talks about his life, but he also interjects this second voice, which is, I guess, what's called Double Melancholy, where it kind of like analyzes the problems with the art and the problems with what he thinks. He's like, like he kind of acknowledges like, maybe, my thinking of this is misogynistic, but that's how I thought, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting. It's this weird like biography, art criticism, sociological study. Yeah, it's excellent. I highly recommend it to anybody who's interested in like art and like queer theory and stuff.
That's super cool. I also took note of the Arsenal Pulp that you mentioned. I haven't heard of that company before.
They're one of my absolute favorite publishers. They're Canadian. I think they're also based out of BC. They do a lot of queer stuff, but it's like all of it is just, it's sort of like indie stuff. Like I said, kind of marginalized, like people of color, stuff like that. Just stuff that normal publishers wouldn't really touch with a 10-foot pole.
That's really cool. There's actually this really awesome bookstore here in Toronto called the Glad Day Bookstore. I was there for like...
Oh my god, I love Glad Day Bookstore. I've never been there, but like I follow it online.
Yeah. I'm obsessed. No, it's actually... I went there for a drag brunch. It was it's a really cool atmosphere. It's something really unique. Yeah, and I was checking out some of their books, and it's like a very radical space. It's quite interesting. If anybody's listening and they're in Toronto or visit Toronto and you're into that, like definitely check out Glad Day Bookstore. They probably have that book there. I would be very surprised if they didn't. Okay, so Rowan, what have you been reading lately?
I have been reading nothing probably as good and educational and interesting as you guys. As always, I'm just keeping it nerdy over here. Lots of comics. I'm trying to balance out because I'm still in classes, so I'm reading like a lot of classical social theory. So
like what?
Well, I'm
typical
Durkheim, Weber, Marx. Yeah, and other than that, just trade paperbacks. I read volume 1 and 2 of Brian Hitch's Justice League from Rebirth, which has been, all right. And what have I read? I've read volume 1 all the way to 3 of Valiant Comics' Ray comic, as well as the 4001 AD event, which I've really, really been enjoying. And I think that's it. I'm also in the process. I'm reading volume 1 of the original Hellblazer series from Vertigo. So
nice.
I've never read anything John Constantine. I'm a huge Swamp Thing fan. I'm a huge Vertigo fan. So I thought it would be only appropriate that I finally read Hellblazer. And I'm loving it because I always love the old Vertigo stuff. It's so weird, and especially as a horror fan, if you're a horror fan...
Oh, Vertigo is a treasure, yeah.
Yeah, Vertigo is up your alley because it's very horror-centric and sci-fi-centric.
It's very weird and offbeat, and yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's all I've really been reading. So, what do you say we get into the review? Our movie is Suspiria from 1977, and OG, and I usually don't even really give credit to the director, but I feel like we can't introduce the movie without saying Dario Argento Suspiria, because this is his baby. So let's get into the trailer, and then we will be back with the bio and the review.
Roses are red, violets are blue, but the iris is the flower that will mean the end of it.
You can run from Suspiria. Suspiria. You can hide from Suspiria. Suspiria. But you cannot escape. Suspiria. The only thing more terrifying than the last 12 minutes of Suspiria are the first 92.
And that was the trailer. So now we will do the IMDb bio, because that's what we do. So, Suspiria is an American newcomer to a prestigious German ballet academy, comes to realize that the school is a front for something sinister amid a series of grisly murders. What do you think? Does that define the greatness of Suspiria?
I mean, nothing can define the greatness of Suspiria. Words, to quote the great Madonna singing words written by the great Bjork, words are useless, especially sentences. And words cannot do Suspiria justice.
Now, I think it's important before we really get into this, because I know we're all biting at the chomp to get in.
Chomping at the bit.
Chomping at the bit. I totally making up
mixing your metaphors.
Mixing my metaphors. But I think it's important that you're probably wondering to yourself, like, is this movie appropriate to show my infant child? And there's only one way to find out, and that's for Mike to let us know about the parental guide.
Yes, this is Mike with your parental guide. Brought to you by the wonderful and not at all pathologically sociopathic users at IMDb. Okay, so we have sex and nudity. I mean, I'm sure this is like the number one. This and violence are the things you're concerned about. So here we go. Sex and nudity. Here are parental guidance. A guy kisses a girl, but not sexually. I mean, that's, of course. But the best sex and nudity warning of all, ballerinas are central in the theme, which, P.S., editor's note, that sentence does not make sense at all. It's a syntactical nightmare, but anyway. And then, finishing that warning in parentheses, wear tight-fitting tutus.
Aren't tutus just the fluffy things?
They are, and so they don't really understand that leotards and tutus are two different things, but that's fine. I do get where they're coming from, though, because one of my favorite things about this movie is the iconic nipples. Like, there is nary a bra to be seen. And I mean, they're these skinny girls, like, doing ballet. I mean, why would you, like, what's a bra?
Why do you need a bra?
Other than a patriarchal fucking construct anyway. So...
Hashtag free the nip.
Hashtag free the nip. Free the iconic nip. Those nips are legendary. So in frightening and intense scenes, we have someone wrote in all caps with an exclamation point, severe. This is a horrifying and eerie, suspenseful horror films with lots of horrifying, nightmare-worthy soundtrack music and gory deaths which are pretty surprising. Okay, fair enough. I'll give them that.
I accept that.
Violence and gore. This is just the last one. I just think this is so ridiculous that it's worth mentioning. Under this category, we have, of course, there's like one where it's like, oh, she sticks a needle through someone's neck, and that's fine. Like, that's violence and gore. But the first one is, Susie faints and has a bloody nose. She soon recovers, however. Never fear, she recovers from her fainting bloody nose spell. You know what? My 2-year-old goddaughter got a goddamn bloody nose today from sticking her finger up there. Should I put that under violence and gore?
Mike, you're so passionate about this.
I am passionate about bloody noses being classified as violence and gore.
Shelter our kids from bloody noses. I used to jump on the couch all the time when I was a kid, and then my knee would come up and smash me in the nose, and I'd always get a bloody nose. That's X-rated.
Yes, kneeing yourself in the face. It's like self-mutilation.
That's the unedited cut of your life movie.
Yeah.
So let's start with we always start with this. What's our experience with the movie? Have we seen it before? Exilia.
I've seen the first 20 minutes on Tubi, and then it stopped working. So that was my experience with this movie prior.
I'll go next. I feel like I always go last or try to go last. So we'll let Mike go last this time. I have seen most of it. I never saw the end of it. I was more familiar with the soundtrack than I was the movie. It's one of my favorite horror movie soundtracks. Before I saw the movie, like I said, I heard the soundtrack first. I'm like, this is incredible. Yeah, it was incredible. So this time that we watched it was actually the first time I've watched it till it was done. So yeah, I'm pretty new to it.
I have to say, sorry, Mike. There's a song that they keep replaying the same songs, but there's one song and it sounds like an intro to a country song. It's like ding ding ding. It's not so much like that, but you guys gotta know what I'm talking about. I'm just this sounds like it's starting of a country song.
Insert that song here. How about yourself, Mike?
Oh goodness. This is potentially one of the most fraught discussions of a movie that I could ever have, honestly, because as I probably mentioned in the intro episode and maybe 5 or 6 times since then, this was one of the probably top 3 formative movie experiences of my life. I have a lot of experience with it. I've seen it dozens of times in numerous formats. I've owned it on VHS, I've owned it on DVD, I've owned it numerous times on Blu-ray. I have the soundtrack. A good dear friend of mine, Holler Gardner, actually ordered for me one year for my birthday, the original Italian vinyl pressing of the soundtrack, which is...
Oh my god, I am jealous.
Oh my god, it's one of the things I treasure most in my life. I'd throw out every record I had to keep that one. As I've said before, in my teens, when I would spend a lot of time at movie stores, this was one of the ones that my favorite video store, Allen's Video, R.I.P., had this top 100 of all time section, and it was just all genres, any type of movie. And this was actually in that section. It was one of the few horror movies in there, and it didn't, look very good, so I never rented it. And I was just, that was kind of when I was starting to get out of just watching pure trash into, expanding my horizons a little bit. But I remember for years, for probably 6 or 7 years, my parents would give me, I loved Entertainment Weekly. This was in the earlier days of the internet. So, you couldn't read everything online. So buying magazines was still a thing. So every year for my birthday, they would give me a subscription to Entertainment Weekly. And I remember one year, it was when one of the Scream movies was coming out. And they had a retrospective of their top 15 or 20 scariest movies of all time. And I had seen most of them, honestly, at that point, because, I was a horror hound even at 15 or 16. But this Suspiria one, it was only blurbs they gave everything, but the little blurb was saying, this is one of the most intense, scary movies you'll ever see. And I was like, bitch, I've seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre. What are you talking about? So, I went to that video store, Alan's Video, and, I was like, oh yeah, that's that movie from Entertainment Weekly. So I rented it. And it's like somebody just filled a potato sack with bricks and just wailed on my face and just bludgeoned my head and just like beat me into like a bloody pulp on the ground. Like, it was, I cannot tell you how walloped I was by this movie. Like, it was just, at that point, I'd really been watching only like shitty slasher movies and like whatever cheap VHS tapes they had. And, I loved them, but I was like, whatever. And then I saw this movie and it was like the first real art movie that I think I'd ever seen. And I never realized that horror movies could be so beautiful. And I was watching it and, sometimes I couldn't even figure out what was going on. But it was the first time I think I ever watched a movie where I did not give a shit what was happening. Because all I could do was like be mesmerized by the visuals and the soundtrack and just the alchemy of it all. Like it cast a spell over me. Like it's all these fucking cliches, but I cannot even put into words like how it affected me, and I just became obsessed with it, and that's it. And here we are 20 years later, and that spell has not waned.
So let's first talk about, I want to know everyone's favorite kill, or favorite scene, or favorite special effect. Maybe they're all rolled into one. I feel it's only appropriate we start with Mike because of how much you love this.
Okay, well, I will state, obviously, it is very, very horrendously difficult for me to narrow any of that down to one. But there's one scene in particular that everything in this was just every frame of this movie has seeped into my entire being and influenced me in ways that I can't even describe. But one scene that I always come back to, and I've shown it to a couple of different people over the years, including one of my friends who is a photographer and like an art student, and like she's brilliant, and she watched it and was like completely blown away by it. Is the scene in which when the maggots start falling off the ceiling, and they get in their hair, and all the girls are running out in the hallway and they're trying to figure out what's happening.
Yeah.
And then when Miss Tanner goes up into the attic, and they have all those shots of like her and, oh my god, I know I've watched it 8 million times, but like his name is just escaping me now. That random white bread European boy, but
oh yeah, the creepy German kid.
Yeah, when it shows them, it shows their shoes walking across the like beautiful wooden planks of the attic floor, but like crunching the maggots as they're going. Ugh. Like, oh my god, that whole scene to me is just like pure fucking art, and it's like, to me, Dario Argento was like a second Kubrick. Like, it's beautiful, it's stunning, it takes your breath away, like, fuck. That is my favorite scene. I'm gonna leave that there. It's hard for me to say there's a favorite scene because I love everything, but that one, like,
memorable.
Like, I will literally find YouTube videos of that to show people just like this 1-2 minute scene and just say like, watch this, and this is how cool this movie is.
How about yourself, Exilia?
There's two scenes that really come to mind for me. One is towards the beginning. Okay, when that girl's murdered by that arm that is just like fakely hairy.
Oh, I was gonna say that fucking hairy ass goddamn arm. Like,
and then she ends up like on above the ceiling, like on that stained glass window, and her hair is hanging out like if you're looking upwards at the window, her hair is hanging out of the window. And
yes, because it hasn't broken open yet.
Yeah, and just like something about that visual I think is really interesting. And then it smashes open, and then like whatever she's attached to, like, it like all the staples come out and it slowly like goes down, and then she gets hanged. Like I think that's an interesting scene. The other one is when Sarah's trying to escape like whatever, and she falls in that pit of barbed wire. I was just like, oh my god, this is so gross to watch. Like it was like, that's the only part of the movie that I was like, oh, like kind of just like, this is not a good thing to watch.
But it's actually, but like, and that's another scene. Like, I have so many scenes that I come back to. Why like it just freaked the shit out of me. But to me, that both of those scenes actually, but especially the second one that you mentioned, like with the razor wire, like it's a fucking nightmare. And it doesn't make any sense, but that's why it's so scary, because it's like, can you imagine getting trapped in razor wire and just having it like shear away at your flesh as you're trying to get out of it? And it's just like, the more you struggle, the more it like slices your flesh open. Like, ugh. No.
It's so gross. It's so gross. That's like torture.
So I'm gonna pick something. Yeah, I'll pick something different. The razor wire, the barbed wire is up there for me for kind of iconic scene. And I don't know if this is like a like basic bitch answer, but the intro is like my favorite scene. As I said, like, to me, the music is so iconic. And like, the minute the title starts and we get that music and we get Jessica Harper, we see her like coming off the plane and she's
the
like,
wind blowing her hair around.
Yeah, and the rain and the thunder, and we're kind of going in and out of the scene without music, with music. I just, everything about that I love. I mean, obviously, anyone that listens to the podcast knows, like, we're huge soundtrack score people. And yeah, that just, I love everything about the opening, even the lettering. Like,
I have, the first note I made in my notebook was the font, exclamation point, underlined, heart.
Yeah, like, I love everything about it. I love, like, the simplicity, but, like, how beautiful it is. Yeah, it's just, everything about that scene gives me life.
Yep, absolutely. And it's just so funny because it sets up the entire movie, like, in a minute and a half, because you get that, like, really cool voiceover where it's like, Susie Banyan, and, you know, it does that, like, kind of, because, you know, the whole thing, and I don't want to go into it because it's been beaten to death, but, like, you know, the whole thing is obviously done like a fairy tale.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like a European fairy tale, and, you know, the voiceover really gives it that, like, kind of, like, detached, where, like, you know, we're watching this happen type of thing. You know what I mean? It really sort of, like, sets it up as, like, a narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
in a surreal way. Yeah.
And I feel like when you're talking about this movie, there's no way to avoid it, and it's probably has been beaten to death, is, like, the coloring of this movie.
It's actually like one of the most spectacular, like, visually spectacular movies I've ever seen in my life.
Yep. And that's one of the reasons why it affected me so much, because I had never seen a movie that looked like that before that. And frankly, that was the beginning of my, like, I'm going to call it, like, my film journey. You know what I mean? Like, when I sort of started going, oh, I want to watch, like, real films, you know, quote unquote, or whatever, like, you know, when you're a teenager. But honestly, even though it's, you know, like, obviously it was like a Technicolor thing, and there are lots of movies out that sort of have a similar color palette and stuff, there has never been anything done even close to this since then, and I don't think there was anything done like it before that either.
Yeah.
Like, it completely and utterly smashed expectations. Like, what you can do with film, to me, with this movie, that was the apex of it.
The thing I really liked was, like, the effects were interesting colors, but also, like, the buildings and the walls, like, those red velvet walls.
The textures of those walls. The textures of the wall. The texture of the wall. The textures of the curtains. Like,
it was amazing. The architecture was absolutely gorgeous. Like, the outside of that, like, the dance academy, that beautiful red, and just, like, the whole look of the building.
You could feel, like, the roughness of it, right? Like, it's very tactile. It was very like sensual in the dictionary definition of that word. Like, you could smell it, you could feel it, you know what I mean? You could hear it. But what's so interesting about it is that it's not even just the architecture, but, like, one of the things, and side note, personal anecdote, there were many times when especially throughout my 20s, when I would, like, show this movie to people. This was kind of like my cool test. Mm-hmm. If you could sit down and watch this movie and have a positive reaction from it, then you were worth my time. And my roommate at the time, this was probably when I was like 25 or so, one of his work friends came over one night, and he ended up becoming a friend of mine too. But, you know, he'd come over and like we'd have a few drinks and like smoke a draw. And one night we were like, let's smoke a joint and show him Suspiria. And so we showed him Suspiria, and me and my roommate at the time sort of like did a running commentary through it, because he was just like, you could look at his face and his eyes were just like, bah! Like they were like the size of plates. Like he was just tripping out. So we were like, we'll just talk to you throughout it, like to kind of keep you grounded or whatever. And I think that he really liked watching movies, but he didn't really pay attention to movies. Like I think he would just sort of put them on and watch them and not, you know, just sort of be like kind of just consuming them, I guess.
Yeah.
And this was when, you know, we were at the height of our like, oh, we're like film studies, and you know, we love like watching Bergman and shit. And so we would point out to him like that a lot of the use of like shadow and stuff in this movie, like if you look at the shadows, the shadows that are created in this movie like actually make shapes. Like you mentioned the outside of the academy specifically, the sconce or whatever you call it over the front door is a beautiful like red and white piece of architecture. But like the way and the lighting in this movie, you know, is out of this world. The way that it's lit, if you look at the shadow that it casts on the side of the wall, it looks like a witch's face with like the hooked nose and the hat and everything. Like it's fucked. And same thing, like, you know, in the opening scene, that terrifying thing when you were saying, you know, like when she's running through the woods and going to her friend's apartment and stuff, like there's insane shadows on the trees that look like, you know, people with hooks and stuff. Like it's fucked. It's fucked.
We watched a couple of the special features, and they did talk about that when the guy with his dog's in the square, and you see the shadows, he was like, it looks like witches on their broomsticks. Like that's the kind of like shadows. The lighting, like that's the thing too. The lighting is done really nicely. I think like the use, that's why I like the stained glass look too, because it's like you can use lighting on stained glass really interestingly to like project color.
Yeah,
I just think it's very nice looking.
And it's funny because the stained glass sort of ties into like the way that he uses lighting, in that even in a specific scene, the lighting is so fucking detailed that like in one room he can have part of the room and the back of someone's head lit with one color, and then the other half of the room lit with a totally different color.
Yeah,
because it's so detailed and like so fucking brilliantly done. And it's like, how the fuck do you like? And you know, in stained glass, that's what it reminds me of, because it projects like multiple colors like of light.
Yes,
you know, and
exactly.
He is constantly like, I mean, some scenes are obviously completely drenched in one color, like that scene that I mentioned where they're in the attic is completely done in like a steely James Cameron like Terminator 2 blue light, whereas the scene when all the girls are in the gym with the curtain around them is
like
completely
red.
In red, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, some scenes like you'll be looking at it and it's like the back of her head is done in green, but then the wall is done in like a kind of beigey yellow color, and then you see the light coming from the bathroom and that's red, and it's just like fucked. It's fucked.
Also, I thought it was really interesting too, and they kind of like raised this point very briefly in the special features, how when she's saying where she's going, it's Escher Strasse.
Escher Strasse.
Like, so Strasse, so Escher Street, and like Escher, the artist.
Oh, he's features prominently in it, yeah.
Like, you would totally, that kind of like sets, it's a little tiny tidbit that kind of like sets it up, like artistically.
You know what? I did not take German, so I didn't realize that, like, Strassen was street.
Oh yeah, Strasse. Yeah,
oh my god! Look, because like for years I've been like obsessed with all of the Escher references that are in this movie in the architecture, and I didn't realize that Escher Strasse meant like Escher Street.
Yeah,
I did not realize that. That's so cool.
Well,
yeah.
I was gonna say, I think you brought up a good point too earlier when you said like you were talking about like how Argento's like very Kubrick. Every detail is like meticulous. There's a purpose.
Yeah.
Just everything is very Kubrick. Like when I look at this, that's what I automatically go to if I'm trying to compare. I'm like, oh, like I know I like this because it gives me this Kubrick feel.
Yep. Honestly, I feel like this compares 100% to The Shining.
Oh yeah, 100%.
There's not even a doubt in my mind, like, that this is just as good, if not better, than The Shining.
I was gonna say, I might, especially with the coloring and stuff and the lighting,
yeah,
like the use of primary colors and yeah, like, and obviously, like, I'm a big fan of like the pinks, that almost neon. You know, I always say, you know, as a modern day reference, I always say, you know, it's got that like Rent look.
Yeah,
that
it does look very much. There was also a scene where she's about to like find the witches, and she is just a really small part, like centered in the scene on the camera, and the rest is that beautiful wall, the one where you have to like turn the blue iris or whatever.
Oh yes,
and the mural behind her. I don't know if you remember, but when I worked at Chapters, I had a couple books illustrated by her, and she does fairy tales. Camille Rose Garcia.
Oh, I do. Yes, because she did Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I think this movie is very Alice in Wonderland-esque.
It is.
She goes down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, so I was saying, like, even though Camille Rose Garcia's illustrations are a lot like darker, this backdrop is just like the curves and the style of the illustration is very much the same style.
Yeah, but it has shades of Escher in it as well, because it's like upside down staircases and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I also wanted to emphasize, because you brought it up, Mike, too, was like the camera angles, the camera shots, like, blow me away. Like, it has this like panoramic look where he's so good at where, you know, kind of the background is like kind of blurred and not in focus, and he makes sure you're focusing on exactly what he wants you to focus on in the story. And he also and I can't think, we reviewed something during the podcast that kind of did the same thing, but he does that great thing where, like, it's never just like a normal camera view. Like,
it was Rob Zombie, you're thinking?
Yeah, Rob, which would make sense.
Who is a modern day Argento?
Yeah, well, and I'm sure a huge fan. But you know, those camera angles of like kind of down a bit and looking up, or up looking down, and like. Yep. And like you said, very Alice in Wonderland, very fairy tale, you know, warped perceptions and like what's reality, what's not reality. And I know I've read, you know, a quote from Argento that said that in terms of coloring and even like the feel, he was going for fairy tale, and even more so with the coloring because he wanted it to be colored like Snow White, Disney's Snow White.
Yes, which is, again, a Technicolor film, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just, like, he just does such a great job of, like, creating this, like, fairy tale-esque, fantastical horror world.
I also I really love this setting. Not only because Germany is one of my mother, you know, homelands, but also because I'd something about that era in German history, like that, like unification era. Yeah, I just find really interesting, and like I wish we had have seen more outside of the academy, but even just seeing, like, there's one scene, it's really minute, but it's like an old German car, and it's just like they're so boxy, and it's just like this certain aesthetic to it as well. It almost looked like it was like an East German car, and that's like a very specific aesthetic.
Well, yes, and I mean, you know, of course, as, you know, we just said, every detail that he puts into that movie would have been like meticulously planned. So, you know, when you've got your divided Germany, you know, that's going to factor into it, obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we also brought it up briefly, but I feel like it definitely deserves another go-around. Like, even though, I mean, if you really break it down, the music, I mean, it's only really two main pieces used.
Yeah, so you guys definitely know the song I'm talking about.
Yeah,
in
the entire film, but like you never bore of them. They're like, it's used so great to create this tension and like memorability. Like everything's very memorable, and yeah, I just had to emphasize like how great musically it is.
Well, yes, but it's funny because, like you said, it's like X said, it's like two different songs, but in a way, it was sort of like them taking, and to me, this was sort of like another callback to Kubrick, like, his use of like classical music, especially in something like, Clockwork Orange.
Yeah.
It was very classical in a way, even though it was intensely progressive, like, German rock, like art rock, but it was variations on a theme. They would take these couple of themes and do variations on them, like, to suit the pitch of the narrative of whatever they were doing. And it's like, so really you've got like 10 or 12 different pieces, but it's like maybe 3 sort of like families of music, and I just think that's brilliant.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess it's worth, if people are like gonna look it up or anything, Goblin is who did the music for it. Goblin they work very closely with Argento, so they do other soundtracks. This is probably
Deep Red, Tenebrae.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is probably my favorite for what they've done for him. Just because, my God, it's such an amazing theme. So,
well, I mean, this is one of those times when it's like this is something that they keep coming back to, and I don't even remember who said it to me or where I read it, but it's one of the most influential things anybody's ever said to me about like art in general, but especially movies. That's alchemy, and it's more. Every movie is more than the sum of its parts, and so the music is great. The script is whatever it is. Some people are like, it's style over substance. Who cares? The photography is great. The acting is very stylized and interesting. But, like, it's all these intense parts that come together. And as far as I'm concerned, I love Dario Argento. I think that at least 4 of his movies are complete and utter masterpieces. But, like, this movie and their Goblin's work on this soundtrack, it was an alchemy that like can never be replicated. Like, it was the pinnacle of both their careers, and just the way that they fit together and work together. Like, I think it was one of those, like, it was kismet. It was this weird, bizarre, like, planets aligning that like will never happen again.
Yeah, it's like this like perfect storm.
Absolutely, yeah.
People seem to like talk about, they don't really like the plot or it's really super simple, but this, like, while you're talking, it just makes me think of It Follows, because this is what we talked about with It Follows.
Yeah.
Super simple plot, but everything else comes together to just make it like so good, like a masterpiece kind of deal.
Yeah.
Film has a script, but it's also a visual medium, and like it has sound design and it has a soundtrack. All these things work together. You can't just analyze something in terms of like its narrative. Mm-hmm. Like, it's so fucking boring. If that's how you analyze everything, you're a fucking boring piece of shit. You know what I mean? Like, it is alchemy. It is everything working together.
Yeah, well,
and things don't have to be complicated for them to be like good.
Well, and to me, I think this movie, especially with narrative, whether your opinion on it is it's not a very strong narrative, or maybe you like the narrative, to me, when people talk about like style over substance, this is a movie that like it doesn't matter because it works. To me, it doesn't matter how complicated or how simple the story is or could be. The style compels you into the narrative. In fact, to me, the narrative is the style. Mm-hmm. I mean, the narrative is almost told through the style, through the music, through the colors, through the like sound editing and the sound effects.
Amen.
Yeah, like, so whether, like I said, whether it's simple or not, to me, Argento just like knocked it out of the park in terms of just visual, turning film into art.
Yeah.
Yes, and like, again, film is, it's not a novel. If it was a novel, you could get away with critiquing the narrative. I mean, listen, like, yes, you can critique the narrative of a film, but that is a very minor part of it. Film is a predominantly visual and auditory medium, especially visual. Mm-hmm. And there is no way in hell you can say that this doesn't have visuals like nailed to a fucking cross like goddamn Jesus Christ. So, you know what I mean?
Or like Sarah when she's like nailed in her wrist.
Yes, exactly. When she's got those pins stuck in her eyeballs.
Oh.
Which, by the way, I only realized after watching it dozens of times when I got the Holler Synapse remastered Blu-ray.
That's what we watched as well.
Yeah. I had been waiting years for that to come out, and Synapse did a mind-blowingly good job. I had seen it, 50 times in my life, and it was like watching a new movie. But I had never noticed that those pins were stuck in her eyeballs before I watched the Synapse Blu-ray.
Yeah, it's so creepy.
Never noticed that. Like I said, dozens of times. But now, that said, I've watched it on, like, weird cuts, because, like, every one of Argento's movies has, like, at least 8 or 9 different cuts, with, like, weird bits and pieces cut in and out of them. So, like, I'm sure the VHS I had one cut on it, and the Blu-ray I had a different cut, and the 2 DVDs I had different cuts, but, like, I don't ever remember seeing those pins in her eyes, and I actually paused and tried to take a screenshot of when it showed the straight razor in the case with the 2 pins stuck in, and I was like, I remember the first time I watched it going, what are those pins for? I don't remember that scene. and then when I watched it, I was like, oh my god, those fucking pins are stuck in her eyes. Like, how did I not notice that before? And I don't know if that was a part of the new cut, or if it was just because it looked so good that I actually noticed it. 1080p is a hell of a drug.
That scene was so great, and I mean, it's definitely worth mentioning that I think the gore and the violence is also, like, very artfully and, like, beautifully done. He does not skimp on it, but, like, our reds and our blood are, like, extra red.
They're so red. I was thinking, like, what is he using for the blood? Like, it's so red.
Yeah, and, like, just everything, like we keep saying, everything is, like, very, like, methodically done and thought through, like, from how they're injured to like I said, the blood, the blood patterns, everything is, like, done perfectly. And as a horror person, like, there's, like, some pretty good, like, kills in this. We talked about the barbed wire stuff, because when I think about older movies, I think everyone always hesitates that's maybe, like, younger, because it's like, oh, like, there's not really anything scary, or there's not, it's like someone gets their throat cut with a knife, but I don't see anything, but, like, this is, like, pretty graphic. Like, I'm thinking, like, when they cut Sarah's throat and you're, like, watching the skin, like, split open,
and the, like, fat underneath,
yeah, like, especially for, like, its time, it's, like, it's pretty gory, but it's, like, very well done, and the kills are all interesting.
But that's what's so funny about this movie, is that, like, this is the, like, kind of paradox of it. It's hideously gory, right? Which sort of automatically puts it on certain people's radars as, like, ban this, cut it to bits, don't let people watch the full version of it. But at the same time, the gore is so stylized and not realistic. Like I said, the blood is just, like, it's not a brown realistic blood spurting at, like, a realistic angle. It's every gore, like, when her throat gets cut, it's a stylized throat cut. When her nose bleeds, it's clearly, this, like, primary color, like, just appealing to your, like, kindergarten, oh my god, blood equals red equals danger, right? You know what I mean? Like, it's this weird ambivalent kind of thing. Like, it's gory, but the gore is completely stylized and unrealistic, so it sort of, like, skirts the censorship issues in a way, and that, like, it doesn't look real, but, like, you look at it and go, it's kind of scary because it's so stylized.
Another thing I wanted to bring up, I mean, who doesn't want to bring up everything about this movie, but I think it's worth mentioning, like, the dubbing in the movie, which, to me, like, I could see maybe if you're not used to it, it could kind of turn you off. Like, their mouths aren't really lining up with the words, but as someone that really likes, like, Italian horror, like, to me, this is, it's not good B-grade Italian horror movie unless I get that kind of look in the bad dub.
I feel like that really suited the movie.
Yeah,
it really fit the movie well.
Yeah, and it's weird. Like, I'm trying to think how to say it, and it's hard to say. But to me, like you said, it fits the movie, and it's artfully done. Because I mean, if you don't know about it, so Argento had all of the actors and actresses. They all spoke in their native tongue. So I think I'd read about 6 of them spoke English, and then there was like some people that spoke Italian, some that spoke German.
Yep.
Because everyone knew the script, like they knew, even if they didn't understand the language, like they knew what was going on in that scene, and then they just got them to dub it afterwards, after they shot the movie. But it just gives it this aesthetic that, like, I really love that aesthetic.
I think the most interesting part of that is people who are speaking English, and then they're dubbing over what they're saying in English.
And it's just like a little off.
A little tiny bit off. I
of the
think
picture.
that's so interesting.
But I find that it kind of contributes to the atmosphere of the movie because, like, one of the reasons why it's so creepy is because it, like, gives you, like, it's all about paranoia, right? Like, you get paranoid, and to me, the, like, dubbing, sometimes it's obvious that the person who's speaking, if you look at their mouth, they're not actually speaking in English, and that they're being dubbed over, but then sometimes it's like, this person's probably speaking in English, but they're also being dubbed over, and it's just slightly off, and to me, it contributes to this, like, paranoid atmosphere where everything is slightly off, and it contributes to that, like, mood. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, the whole mood is that you're kind of paranoid, and, like, things are off. Like, things are not right here. And to me, that's just, like, a structural way of showing that things aren't right. So it's, like, weird that, like, the form of the movie, even if it's intentional or not, like, kind of fits with the theme of the movie, which is that things are off and not right, and you should be paranoid.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Another thing I know I wanted to bring up was that this is only the second movie I've ever seen with Jessica Harper in it. So I was, like, pretty excited when I had first found out that she was the star of this. I'm familiar with her through Shock Treatment.
Oh, yeah. That's who it is.
Are you just realizing this now?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I didn't even realize
the
this.
star of Shock Treatment. And I know, and I should have wrote it down, I can't remember the name of the movie she was in before this. It was that horror rock opera movie.
Phantom of the Paradise. Brian De Palma.
I haven't seen that yet.
Oh, it's great. Brian De Palma.
I haven't seen it yet, and it's one of those movies that anytime I'm in a movie store and I see it, I'm like, I need to buy this because it's definitely up my alley, and then I never buy it.
It's 100% up your alley, and I can't believe we've never had a movie night with that movie. I feel like this is a failure of friendship on my part, and I apologize.
Slaves might have to cover it. We might have to cover it.
We should. Bonus episode.
I do know in the special features they said that Argento saw that, and that was why he casted her in this, was because he liked her so much in that.
Yeah.
Fun facts.
As we all know, I love logic. And Rowan and I were talking about when she goes and visits, like, the psychiatry place, and how the guy's like, witches, it's all bullshit. Talk to this other guy. He knows everything about it. Like, what he says is, like, gospel, essentially. And then that guy believes in witches.
Yeah, then that guy's like, magic definitely exists.
The first guy's like, it definitely doesn't. It's bullshit. But talk to this guy, because everything he says is right.
Now,
also, Udo Kier.
Okay, I was literally just gonna say, when I looked at Exilian, I'm like, do you recognize that guy? And I realized it wasn't as impactful to her because she didn't know who I was talking
she doesn't know who it is.
I know. Yeah. I like. It's one of those people that I'm like, yeah, I've definitely seen this person before.
He's been in every movie of all time. Udo Kier is a cult icon.
Every time I see him, I just think about Blade.
Oh yeah, yeah, and also the Madonna Deeper and Deeper video. But anyway, maybe that's just me.
He's just like a very iconic looking person. He has like a very unique unique look.
Because I think his eyes.
It's the eyes.
Yeah.
It's his
It's
eyes.
his eyes.
He has these like fucking completely clear electric eyes, and they're just like
And I feel like he's been casted as a vampire like a lot. Like
well,
in
he was
multiple
in
movies.
a couple of vampire movies.
Yeah, I mean,
And
maybe
a
it's
Frankenstein movie and a couple other things.
He does love horror, that's for sure. Is there any other bits and parts we want to talk about?
Not really, because I could go on for hours, but I'm not going to, because I'm going to spare y'all, except to say that my last word on this is that I feel like there has not been a auteur modernist horror movie of this caliber since then, and it's maybe because it's like the last vestige of the like filming on film, whereas now everything is on digital, and frankly I don't think things look good on digital even when they're very well done. I've been waiting for my whole life for there to be another movie like this, and there hasn't been visually or in terms of the soundtrack or just the aesthetic in general, and that's why it's a pinnacle to me.
Fair enough. So I'll get into my last question before we rate it. I want to know, is it scary? Is this movie does it work as a horror movie?
It scared the shit out of me.
We have Mike's answer.
Do with that what you will.
How about you, Exilia?
I certainly think it's a horror movie for sure. If I had seen this when I was younger, no, that's not true because I don't find a lot scary. If I had seen this in 1977, I would probably think it was fucking horrific, like so scary.
I feel like it was scarier than The Exorcist at the time.
Yeah, to me, The Exorcist isn't scary.
No, thank you.
I really think at the time it would be quite horrifying. I don't think it's scary. I think like the razor wire, ooh, that's disturbing to watch, but I'm not like gonna have nightmares about it.
That's fair enough. For me, sorry, Mike. I feel like it wasn't scary. I guess part of my thing is like
it's too beautiful to be scary.
I'm so in it. It's so beautiful. I'm in awe of this beauty. And there were parts like the razor wire, that little German kid.
That German kid was so creepy.
He was great, yeah.
Giving me those Village of the Damned vibes.
Oh yeah, that like fucking Aryan fucking bullshit, yeah.
And the bowl cut, mushroom cut.
Yeah, like there's definitely aspects to that. But I don't necessarily think like it needs to be scary. Like it works so well, and it blends thriller with horror so perfectly, and it's just amazing.
Well, it's just so funny that X brought up semiotics earlier, because every time I watch this movie I'm like, it's a semiotic nightmare. Because there's just so much fucking like signifiers and signified in it that like you can't, there's like, we could spend hours talking about the semiotics of this movie, but we can't. But like there's just so much going on. It's like this Jungian, Freudian fairy tale nightmare. Like you just,
we'll save that for when we have to record like Suspiria Part 2, the background.
Well, when we do the Suspiria remake.
Oh yes, I haven't seen it. Neither is Exilia.
Neither have I.
Oh, there you go. So let's get into rating it. Let's start with Mike, because I feel like you will be less of a surprise.
Yay, plus. Top 3 of all time. That's all I have to say about
slay?
that. Yay. Oh, slay, plus. Sorry. And
you were like,
no. Cut. Okay. Slay plus. I mean, listen, this is a personal, like, it's a touchstone movie for me. It is a touchstone. That's all I have to say. Like, it influenced every movie I ever watched since then.
I expected no less.
I'm glad I don't disappoint you, Rowan.
I am also gonna give it a slay plus. This is like up there, my favorite soundtrack. Probably my favorite visually for sure. This is like literally everything I like in a movie, everything I like in my horror movies. And add all those other pluses Mike added, because I do love this movie. Now, who I really want to hear from is Exilia.
I will give it a Slay plus.
Ooh,
Hot damn.
Okay. I was like,
I'm not going to give it plus,
to have to yell at you.
No, I'm not going to give it like a billion pluses just because that could go to infinity, but I'm going to give it a Slay plus. Yeah, honestly, this is probably one of my favorite movies, period.
Period T.
Yeah. This is my first time seeing it. I'm definitely going to have to watch it like 1,000 more times to really like absorb new elements from it. Visually, it is up there with Enter the Void for me, which is like very different visually, but also like an incredible movie in that respect. I think everything about it, even stuff people think are corny or like bad plot or blah, 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 I think it all works together really well. And
So unanimous Slay pluses. I think this might be the first time.
I almost say that it would be like a masterpiece.
Oh, I 100% say it's a masterpiece.
I think masterpiece is like too low of a praise. It needs higher praise.
No, and I'm telling you right now, like, because I cannot impose my white cisgender male opinion on other people, and I won't. But I am just saying it right now because it's our podcast. I feel like it's, legitimately the benchmark for every horror movie. Ever since I watched it when I was like 14 years old, it is the single benchmark against which I measure every horror movie I've ever watched.
That must be rough.
Yeah.
It is rough. Like there's a lot of bad ones.
It's the rough. It's the roughest.
So I'd say it's time to get into the budget game, because we all love the budget game. Now, this is going to be a little different because I don't have how much it costs. IMDb doesn't have the amount. Wikipedia didn't have the amount. I'm kind of going to take that. I mean, we do know as we get, further back into history, record keeping was not always amazing and people didn't always report what they spent. But I do have what it made, so I've split this into 2 questions. So we're gonna start with Italy. How much we think this made in Italy, and I've converted it to US dollars. So
why do we convert to US? We're Canadian. We should be converting it to a Canadian dollar.
Because everyone, I guess, we bow down to the pressures of the US dollar.
The ethnocentrism of American politics and economics.
So we'll start with Mike. Mike, how do you think this did? How much money do you think it made?
I feel like it made slightly south of $4 million.
Okay, Exilia?
I think it made 183 million lira. Okay, in US dollars.
What the fuck, bitch? What the fuck? What are you doing to me here?
I actually maybe like 30 million US dollars, maybe. I have no idea.
So Mike will take this.
What?
Oh my
you said
god.
4 million? Really?
Well, and Mike is not that close.
But I'm closer than you.
So
fucking 100 million lira, bitch.
153 million lira. That's how much it made.
I have down to the dollar. So in Italy, it made $1,620,947.
What? That's so low.
I didn't write it down, but I do know I think it had a very limited box office release, and this is video. The box office only, I didn't do it because it was pretty small. Like I think it was like $20,000 or something.
That's incredible.
So let's do US. Now the US is video because this didn't have a release in like a big release in the US. So how much do you think it made in the US, Exilia?
Okay, so for before it was in Italy or in Europe?
Yeah, so this is like video release, like home video
US?
in the US.
Oh, $3 million.
And Mike?
7 mil.
You're both pretty high. Exilia will take it. So it made 1.8 million for US for home video sales. I feel
okay. 7 mil to 1.8 is not pretty high. You are not even in the ballpark. You are in another galaxy.
And I mean, I think it's unfair to you guys as well, because we all agree, like, this movie is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
But I do think it's definitely, like, you know, I think about if I'm... Well, I shouldn't say that, because I feel like this is a university crowd movie. Like, it's an intellectual university crowd.
Oh, yeah.
If I'm, like, at a sporting event for a university... Like, the sport bros probably aren't gonna have seen this. Like, I don't think this is, like, a pop...
I guess it's not, like, a super, like, yeah. Like,
you kind of need to be into film or be into horror to kind of know about this. Like, I didn't know about this movie till, like, you know, probably a couple years ago. And, I mean, I've been in the horror ever since I was younger, but no one had ever brought up Argento.
Like it's more, like, cult classic.
It's very cult.
Like mainstream.
Yes, very, very much so. It's promo time. It's promo time. We gotta pay the bills to ourselves. So as always, we want to make sure that you follow us on our social media. It Slays Podcast on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. Make sure on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, you're commenting on everything because we will respond. We want to talk to people. We want to know what you thought about this movie. I want to know, I want to ask like something kind of specific. I want to know, when did you discover Dario Argento and Suspiria? What was your first experiences about it? I'd like to know, and if we do get any responses to it, I thought it'd be fun maybe next episode we could read some of them.
Yes, definitely.
Oh, that'd be fun.
I also want to bring up one of our humble hosts, Exilia, has curated a Spotify playlist of some of our favorite horror music, so music from horror movies, whether that's score or songs, and you can find it. It's It Slays Podcast Horrific Playlist. Give it a follow. We're gonna keep updating. I've already got some new ideas. Also want to thank everyone that's given us an iTunes rating. We just want to always let you know we appreciate any new iTunes ratings, especially written ones. You can say whether you like this or not, and maybe we could read those on the next episode as well. But every rating helps more people find us because we get further and further up on the search engine.
Yes, tell us to go fuck ourselves with jagged broomsticks.
That's right. Tell us to fall in a room of barbed wire. And the last thing, we do have a new segment that we are going to do. I don't have any fancy name for it. On Instagram, we are going to be utilizing Instagram Live, and we are going to be reviewing horror television shows. So we're going to go on live for, you know, maybe a max of 20 minutes, maybe longer or shorter, depending who's all on with us. Not all of us will always be there. Might be one of us, might be two of us. Who knows? Maybe we could invite some guests on the live. But yeah, we're going to be just reviewing shows. And we're going to start, since we're all Canadian born, we're going to start with Are You Afraid of the Dark? So we will start at season 1, episode 1, and we're going to start next week. Keep an eye out on our Instagram story, because that's when we're going to announce when we will be on live. We'll give 24-hour notice, but I think we're pretty excited to start that.
I'm definitely excited to go back and watch some episodes of The Midnight Society.
I think it'll be definitely interesting, see how they hold up.
I love a good throwback.
Yeah.
And to announce our next episode, we are back on Exilia. Her reign is back.
Yes.
And it is her pick.
Queen.
So the next review is going to be of The Lost Boys, one of the first horror movies I ever saw. And I haven't seen it for a couple years, maybe like 10 years, but I'm excited to rewatch it once again.
10 is more than a couple.
I guess it's been less than 10, but it's been several years. And this is, my parents are kind of infamous for just listening to soundtracks on repeat in the car. And my mom, she used to drive this gold Toyota Camry back in the day, and we had a CD player, and we would always listen to the soundtrack of The Lost Boys. So good memories.
I love the soundtrack to this movie. I know we'll talk about it for 20 minutes, but preview, it will be me splooging all over the soundtrack to this movie.
So all we're telling you is, before that episode, make sure you rewatch it, lube up your saxophones, get your
sexy sax on.
Get your sexy sax on, get your fingerless gloves out, take your shirt off, maybe a trench coat, and get ready for some Kiefer Sutherland goodness.
And Corey Feldman.
R.I.P. Corey Haim.
Yeah, R.I.P. Corey Haim. So I think that's everything from us. Thanks as always for all the support. We appreciate it. I am Rowan.
See you later. It's Exilia.
No, this is Exilia. Bye.